Oh, that's right. You know what time it is. It's time for the Sugar Creek Forge Build-Along 2012. I got my hand on the fire, putting the fire to the steel. Come on, Sugar Creek Forge.
Hey everybody, today's video is about simple forges. It's the third one, and I fired up the little propane forge and heat treated a piece of metal in it. I didn't have another blade handy, and I also wanted to do a little destruction testing, and so I just cut a piece of the same steel that we've been using in the build-along, heat treated that and as a demo, and showed a little bit about it. So also I'm so thankful, got a special guest appearance to talk about what heat treating does inside of metal. It's a little bit technical, but really good information in it. And so please stay tuned for that at the end of this video. It'll definitely be worth watching. And I want to give a special shout out to people. I've had a number of contacts from people who are watching this video series and building along. They're not on the official, official build team, but they are building with us, and I'm so thankful for that. It's just so cool. If you ever have a question, please don't hesitate to ask, leave a comment, PM. A bunch of our team members are super helpful, and don't hesitate to ask them. Evie Crawfish and a bunch of others are, a bunch of our supporters are answering questions. Too many people to name, but be sure to do that. And show us your progress. Attach any photos, movies to as a VR to any of the builds you choose. Also, sometimes people are wondering, what video they should attach a VR to. Doesn't matter. Just attach it to whichever one you think is the most appropriate. So let's jump right in and heat treat a knife. The first thing you'll notice about how I've customized my gas forge a little bit is I put a hole all the way through the back. And I kept this as small as possible so that the knife blade could actually go right through the forge and out the back. That's to take advantage of the hot spot that we have when heat treating with this little forge. Now you're going to want to adjust your torch up and down, in and out, until you hear that noise. You can hear that the fire is roaring a little hotter, and that's right where you want your torch to be. So kind of just judge by sound and get it where it sounds the hottest. Now what you'll see is the flame is shooting through, and there's a hot spot inside the forge right up against the opposite wall. That's where the gases and the oxygen are mixing, and it's the hottest. That's where we want to be working the knife. And with this forge, it's a little tricky. You've got to go back and forth with the knife to get it hot. And you can see already some scale is coming off the knife. That's a good sign that it's plenty hot in there, but it's also an oxidizing atmosphere. So you can see I'm holding the blade close to the back of the wall on the right side there, and I'm just moving it back and forth to get an even heat. It's a little bit how some forges are used to heat treat swords. And you just want to keep it real even, moving back slowly, watching the color, and not overheating one spot. Just be patient and do this very slowly so that you don't get one real hot spot in the blade and the rest of it is too cool. Also, this is going to work a little better with a knife blade that's ground because it's going to be thinner. This is an unground piece of 1095. So I'm just moving the piece of metal back and forth across that hot spot slowly. And it's heating up nicely. I'm just checking it here off camera against a magnet. It's really doing well. It's pretty bright out, so it's kind of hard to see the color. But it is getting very hot. So again, just smoothly back and forth. Now on the edge. Check it against the magnet. We're good. So I heated it up one more time and checked it with the magnet. Made sure that it was really, really hot. And this is my quenching oil, just in an old tin can. I think some single malt scotch came in this can. It's perfect for heat treating because it's long and narrow, and because it's made out of tin or thin steel. Holds my oil very well. Again, we're just quenching in inexpensive oil, testing against the magnet, quenching. And we have success. So you can kind of see there, that's the heat treated area. It looks pretty even. I did it very carefully and kept the heat even. So let's check the hardness with a file. You can hear it just sounds like I'm filing over glass. And sorry, I guess I was kind of off camera a little bit. It looks really good. It's very even. I'm testing the whole area that I heat treated. And it's good. So again, with this little forge, running with just a common propane torch, it's inexpensive. I'm not sure in other places, but here in Sugar Creek at the hardware store, those propane cylinders for a plumbing torch are very inexpensive. They're a little over $3. I think they're $3.69 or something like that. And they last a pretty long time, because even though it's in a forge, you're just still using it at the same way that you would if you were sweating some pipes or something like that. So the key is, again, to go very evenly and smoothly through that hot spot. It's easy to overheat in one area if you're not careful, and to also keep it against the far wall. That's where the most heat is being generated and then also being reflected by the round walls. You can see too that it didn't heat up inside enough to give any trouble with the stainless steel pipe that I have lining that little forge. It's not getting super hot or creating trouble. It's not really a long-term solution. For that, I would want to use refractory or something that I could take that pipe out, and then you would just have the clay. If you've ever seen videos of a one-brick fire brick forge, this works basically under the same principle. And maybe even those are a little more efficient, but these are certainly very, very easy to make, inexpensive, and easy to source. So we've heat treated the blade now, and I want to show you, for those of you who are kind of new to metallurgy, we're going to see a little bit more about that at the end of the video. But what I did is doing a little destruction test and showing you that this is completely heat treated through evenly, and also why we want to temper knives. We heat treat them, they're very hard and brittle, and why we temper them back to make them strong. So watch this little clip of some destruction testing. I've clamped our metal into my vise, and bang, it just breaks off with very little effort at all. And let's take a look at what we've got here. I'm just checking to look at the crystalline structure of the steel to see how big the crystals are and how efficient our heat treat has been. Now, as you can see, this has a pretty even gray color, and if you look very closely, the crystals inside of this heat treat matrix are very fine. They're not super coarse, so I'm glad to see that. It means that I did not overheat the steel. And here's another close-up. Sorry, my macro wasn't working so hot, but I'm real happy with this. This is what dead hard looks like.
What's up, everybody? I'm doing this little video on basic metallurgy and heat treating for Sugar Creek Forge is built along. I just wanted to talk to y'all a little bit about heat treating and what actually happens and the reason that it has to be done in order to make an effective blade or a tool or whatever. Steel is a mixture of iron and carbon. Now, these representations like this are good for just describing things, but in actuality, you know, matrices look a lot different than this. For instance, this is a body-centered cubic structure of ferrite, which would be like a steel at room temperature, where you have an atom on all four corners at the top, all four corners at the bottom, and one in the center. This is a body-centered cubic structure. It's actually a tightly packed molecular crystal, and there is these atoms are actually shared by the next adjacent crystal. This is a really tight packed structure, like I said. When you heat it up, it changes to something called austenite. Oh, and by the way, like in this state as the ferrite, you've got little, you know, carbon atoms throughout the steel, depending on the carbon content of the steel. But this being a really tight packed structure, the carbon really can't enter this matrix. Over here, when you heat it up, it transforms into something called austenite, which is a face-centered cubic structure. What really happens is this lattice expands greatly compared to this one, and you get, you know, as well as having the atoms on all 8 corners of this box, you have one on each face. Alright, there's nothing in the middle. I don't believe. I'm not positive about that, but I don't believe there is. But I know this is a very highly expanded version of this on a molecular basis. Okay, so when this happens, when it expands like that, the carbon atoms that are outside here, just floating around, can actually enter into this matrix. Okay, so in this state, the iron is soluble to the carbon. The carbon will actually enter into the matrix. Okay, so what happens really is when you cool, this is a time and temperature chart. There's one for every different steel type, but just as a generalization, what happens when you cool the steel at a really rapid rate, this right here is what you get with a martensite structure. When that structure collapses back into a body-centered cubic structure, all those carbon atoms that have entered it are trapped inside of there. And since they're trapped inside there, the crystal lattice has a lot of strain on it. And that stress condition is what actually makes the steel hard. But by the same token, it's extremely brittle because of that hardness. When you temper your steel, you're actually allowing some of the carbon atoms to escape, and therefore relaxing the structure a little bit. But any steel that you heat treat, you can get this chart for. And what's important is, you see this nose right here? This is like usually called the perlite nose. If you quench the steel from the austenization temperature in the time requirement to miss the nose of this curve, then martensite will form. Notice it doesn't start forming immediately. This one's in Celsius. I couldn't find one in Fahrenheit, but the martensite start temperature is this red line right down here. It doesn't start, until about 400 or 500 degrees Fahrenheit. If you hold that temperature right above martensite start, you'll get another structure of steel called bainite. You can get upper or lower bainite, which is a really, really good compromise between hardness and toughness. It's an alternative to a tempered martensite, and it really works good on a lot of blades, especially big blades. This is an iron carbon phase diagram. It has your temperatures over here and your carbon content down here. Everything past this line is cast iron. Anything over 2% carbon is cast iron. Right here in the very center, you have the eutectoid line, which is 0.83 to 84% carbon. 1084 is eutectic steel, which means that this line is the temperature, the lower transformation temperature. This is where your steel is going to lose its magnetism. And you'll notice that this line does not change at all for the amount of carbon in the steel. This line, however, this is the upper transformation temperature line. It does change. So the quench temperature that you should quench any given steel at is different. The only one that you should actually quench precisely at non-magnetic is 1084. Now, above this line in carbon content and below this line in carbon content, the quench temperature rises that you should quench your steel at. And you can get heat treat information about any kind of steel out there under the sun. Just look on the internet, and it wouldn't hurt to get you one of these diagrams and just study it. Everything, you know, above this eutectoid point is known as a hypereutectoid. Anything below it is a hypoeutectoid. I don't want this video to be too complicated or anything like that and blow anybody's mind, but basically, if you just kind of follow the guidelines of your charts that you can get online and hit it kind of close, like with 1095, the steel that y'all are using in the build along, it is right about here. And you'll notice that there's not a big difference in the quench temperature between the lower and the upper transformation temperature. The 1333 is what it says right here. I've always heard 1340, but that's the Curie point of steel. But it looks like the upper transformation line is right about probably 1425. I've always heat treated 1095 at about 1450, 1475, to be honest with you. If you don't have a pyrometer and you're using a magnet, just when you find out that it won't stick to a magnet, just heat it just a little bit hotter, not much at all, and then quench it. But anyway, I don't want to make this a long drawn out video, just give y'all a little heads up of what's actually going on in the steel. But I hope this helps somebody out, and take care. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Artist Blade 1972. Man, I appreciate you. Good information. I heat treated this piece of steel, keeping in mind some of the things that he had said in this video. Heated to non-magnetic, just got it a tiny bit hotter, and quenched it, and you can see from the results how well it works. So I just appreciate so much him taking the time to do this for us as a team. If you're not subscribed to him, please do. Anyone watching, this guy makes incredible knives, and is one of those true do-it-yourselfers who figures things out, and has got a lot of wisdom. He also is so humble and willing to answer questions, so don't hesitate to throw some questions his way. Don't overdo it or he'll hate that I just said this. But anyway, thanks so much, and heat treat those knives.
Well, the first time in my life I'm gonna hand make me a knife. Well, I know I'm just a noob, but Tim will teach me on YouTube.